Try this. Okay, try this again. It's 10:11, so if we feel ready, I'm going to admit everyone from the waiting room. There's 25 people. And then I have a short introduction, and then the presentation is yours.
All right, take it away.
Okay, wonderful. I'm going to admit everyone. Hello, as you are joining us from the waiting room, thanks for your patience. This is our first Zoom session of the day. We will get started in just about 30 seconds. We'll wait for any of our last colleagues in the waiting room. All right, good morning. I'm going to go ahead and get us started and then let our presenter have their full time. Hello, my name is Summer Rothrock. I serve as the director in the Office of Cross-Cultural and Leadership Development at the University of Pittsburgh in the Division of Student Affairs, and I use she, her, hers pronouns. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this Hesselbein Global Academy virtual summit session entitled Own Your Conversation. Please note that this session is being recorded. We are living in tumultuous times where change is the only constant. For employees, it is important for leaders to steer the ship and display the right kind of behaviors that reassure, inspire, and help people to adapt. Indeed, every leader has authority, but only the best leaders have influence. This session will help participants understand the importance and impact of our conversation on ourselves. I am going to ask if you can just make sure that you're muted so that we'll be able to hear the introductions and the presenter. Participants will also learn about influencing without authority and gaining authority with respect through purposeful conversations. Our presenter for this session is Lim Kim Pong. As the CEO and founder of Strength Asia, Kim Pong's vision is to help people across Asia know who they are at their very best and how they can bring this to impact their families, work, relationships, communities, and nations. He calls this his game of the impossible. Kim Pong is also the creator of the Reframe Success is Action, a Gallup certified strengths coach, Soundwave global partner, co-founder of the Transformational Business Network Asia, and a certified Lego serious play facilitator. Well, that sounds like serious fun. That sounds awesome. Thank you to Kim Pong for being with us this morning, and let's go ahead and get started.
All righty. Thank you, Summer, for the really generous introduction. Hello, everybody. My name is Kim Pong Lim, calling in from Singapore. I am the CEO of Strength Asia, as you know, and one of the very core of everything that we do here in Strength Asia is really helping organizations and people around the world build cultures of engagement. And by that, what we mean is, how do we get people to be more energized, more satisfied, more influential, and more impactful in the things that they do, the work that they do, and the relationships that they have, one another. This morning here, and it's 10 p.m. my time here, and this evening on my time here, it's a great pleasure to be meeting everybody here. Thank you so much for gracing this occasion, and thank you very much for the Global Academy for giving me this opportunity to share my story and my ideas with everybody here. We're talking about owning your conversation today, and today I'm going to just invite all of us, as you're listening to my sharing, if there are any questions, please feel free to just put questions into the chat box. And then as we come to the end of the session, I will look at the questions if there are any, and then hopefully I will be able to respond to those questions. At the same time, I'm going to invite you to interactively participate together with me using the chat box in various questions and answers and conversations here. All right, so cool. let us all get started. From my experience here, leaders, there are two kinds, right? Leaders with authority and leaders, with influence. And, the following is a fact. The fact is that, every leader, that we know of has authority, but the leaders that are great, these are the guys and women, right, that has the influence. Every leader has authority, but great leaders, have influence. And influence starts with us. It starts, with the way we are, the way we think, and the way we interact with people around us. It is about, the whole idea of how do we talk? How do we engage people? How do we get people to understand us? How do we get people to believe in us? How do we get people to begin to follow us? That is influence, isn't it? And a lot of it is tied into the conversations that we have with people around us. So my first question of the day is this: do you know how you talk? Now, if I were to kind of ask this question to anybody, what do you think their answers would be? So if you could right now, in the chat box, help me answer this question. Do you know how you talk, right? If it's a yes, give me some idea as to, how you talk. If it's a no, just put down there no in the chat box. So go ahead, let's take a couple of seconds or a minute here to hear from all of you here. Do you know how you talk? All right, so I'm just gonna wait a few seconds and see, so Neil say, yeah. So Neil, tell me, what does that look like, right? When you say, you know how you talk. Rafiki says, yes. What about the rest of you? Do you know how you talk?
I talk too much.
I like that. Stacy Gordon says, maybe not. Sophia Shapiro says, kinda. OBC Olu says, yes. Dina Ayub says, I think so. Very cool. I love all the responses that are coming in. Yes, I speak clearly, concisely, with intent, purpose, and passion. From Justin. Stacy Gordon says, I do know that I talk by listening. Now that's powerful. Harris talks about, yeah, I'm scholarly, results-driven, direct, intentional. Ask a lot of questions. Lovely. Monica Rao says, kind of no, kind of yes, right? So a variety of answers that's coming up here, right? Well, you're going to hear me asking this question. Do you know how you talk very frequently through the course of my sharing here? And right now, what I'm going to do is this, right? I'm going to be showing you some pictures and images on the screen here. And all I'd like you to do is just to respond to those words, right? Or to the questions I'm asking. And it's all about conversations that we are having, all right? So use the chat box here and respond to me. So the first slide here is this. In conversations with people, I interrupt people when they are talking. I'm looking for a yes or no answer here. So go ahead, use the chat box and respond to me, please. I interrupt people when they are talking. So what do you think it is? Yes, no, 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 no. Lots of no's. I love that, right? Sometimes, thank you very much. Lots of no's, sometimes again from Sophia. No, used to, not so much anymore. From Harris, beautiful. Roche says, not really. Justin says, depends on the situation. All right, cool. Next question, everybody. In your conversations, I'm thinking about what to say, and then I wait for the chance to say it. So same thing, yes or no answer. I'm thinking about what to say, and I wait for the chance to say it. Absolutely, yes. I love the honesty in this room here. Thank you very much. It depends, but sometimes, yeah, very cool. And Stephen Juma says, sometimes, and of course, yeah. Monica Rao happens so many times. Regina says, yes. Call Cup says, I wish if I could wait. Yeah, thank you very much. Next question. My mind wanders and I ask people to repeat what they have just said. My mind wanders and I ask people to repeat what they have just said. Yes or no? Lots of yeses here. Very cool. Thank you very much. Keep it coming. No, 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 not really. Sometimes, sometimes. I really zone out, but yes. Very cool. Next question. Do you like the sound of your own recorded voice? Yes or no? Here we go. Lots of no, no way. Yeah. I've been asking this question to lots of people all over the world, right? And more often than not, the answer is no. And yet this is a really strange thing, isn't it? Because we talk all the time, but when every one of us hear our voices for the very first time, most of us will go like, gosh, who is this guy talking? Why am I talking the way I'm talking? And is that voice really my voice? We couldn't recognize our own recorded voice. Next question, everybody. Do you listen to reply or do you listen to understand? Do you listen to reply or do you listen to understand? So a lot of people say understand, depends, listen to understand, understand, lots of understands here, right? And this is, very, very often the typical response from most people. And it's interesting to note that a guy by the name of Stephen Covey, you would know who he is. He wrote a book called The 7 Effective Habits of Leaders. He noticed that most people actually listen with the intention to reply as opposed with the intention to understand, right? So this is really interesting. Most of us think that we are trying to understand, but from the observation of Stephen Covey, we listen more with the intent to reply as opposed to understanding. Next question, everybody. What do you think are the greatest barriers to listening, right? What do you think are the greatest barriers to listening to what people are saying? Yeah, I love that quote from Stacy that says, seek to understand, then to be understood. I love that. So my question here, the greatest barriers to listening to what people are saying, what do you think it is? The environment, one's own opinion, what else? People have their own views and their own opinions. This is from Tony Wang. Joshua Victor says preconceived notions, absolutely close-mindedness, coming from Sophia. Jake says, I'll say how important that person is to you. Yeah, are you paying attention to the person because he or she is important to you? Harry says, we often are wanting of our own views and opinions to be heard, wanting to be heard and valued, perception of the speaker, lack of open mindset of conversations with others, from Williams here. So thank you very much for all the input here. And you guys are all spot on in your contributions to the greatest barriers. A lot of time it's our natural biases, our affinity biases, our gender biases, our confirmation biases. Basically we are listening for what we want to hear, and very often these barriers obstruct us from listening to the actual conversations that we have. Next question, everybody. How many words do you think you speak in a single day? I'm looking for a number here, right? How many words do you think you speak in a single day? It's amazing, isn't it? We talk all the time, but do you know how many words do you think you speak in a single day? All right, I'm looking for a number of thousands. Yeah, maybe 20,000, 10,000, 10,000. Very cool. 15,000 from Jake. Rajesh says 15,000. Well, the answer, ladies and gentlemen, it is 16,000 words, right? We speak on the average of between 16,000 to about 20,000 words per day. And the first time when I kind of realized that, we speak so many words, in a single day, I asked myself the question, right? How can we not waste words, and at the same time, increase the influence of our words? Now, and Stacy Gordon says, is it true that women use more words than men? Well, it's a really good question, Stacy. So let me ask you the question to everybody. Who do you think, use more words, or who do you think talk more, men or women? What do you think? So women, men, both, depends. Interesting, right? Yeah. So Sophia, you're spot on, right? It really depends on the setting. Yeah. So men has been seen to, talk more than women when they're in open, unfamiliar settings, whereas women, they're observed, right, to be talking more than men when they're in intimate, closer settings. I want to apologize if you see that I'm a little bit distracted because my cats are all over my table here. So if you see me kind of being distracted here, please apologize for that, right? So let's keep going here. Talk is the most present and repeated behavior in every one of us. All those questions I asked just now was all about conversations, all about talk. And talk is the most present and repeated behavior in all of us. And yet, we don't really spend too much time thinking about the way we talk, right? We don't think about how we talk. We just talk. And at work or in some situations or relationships, we are expected to be effective in the way we talk. And yet again, for many of us, we don't spend too much time figuring out, thinking how we talk or how we can talk better. So the question I ask you right from the beginning, of the morning here, do you know how you talk? I'm hoping that we can really help all of us here answer this question here. And, in the course of this sharing here, I'll be sharing some questions or some ideas that hopefully eventually will help you answer this question. Do you know how you talk? So let me start off with a couple of questions again here, right? The first question here is when do you feel powerless, right? In your teams that you're leading, in your families, at your workplace, at the university, when do you feel powerless? So Regina says, when I don't have a voice. Dina Ayub says, when I'm not being heard. Sophia says, when I'm outnumbered. Oh my gosh, that's kind of scary, isn't it, Sophia? Right? What other answers do you have, right? When there's a lack of respect for other points of views. And Amelia says, when I'm not respected, yeah. What about the rest here? When do you feel powerless? Too much on my plate and I need to delegate. Yeah, it's like just too much going on, in the situation here. Now, I've been asking this question to, thousands of people all over Asia. So I have a little bit of hindsight as to what people are saying with regards to this question here. When do you feel powerless? And these are some of the responses that I've gotten, right? I feel powerless when I don't have a voice, when I'm not heard, when I'm not included, when I'm not being understood, when I don't understand why decisions are being made, and when I am being ignored here, right? It's got a lot to do with the conversations that we have or do not have. Let me ask you the next question. In your communication as a leader, what do you wish you could do better, right? In your communication as a leader, right? In the space where you're in, what do you wish you could do better, right? Harry says clarity. Dina says to ask more questions. Regina says to communicate that I am accessible. Yeah, hey, it's like, hey, I'm available here, right? Negotiation and persuasiveness, make everyone feel comfortable participating, right? What else? In your communication as a leader, what do you wish you could do better? Make every opinion feel heard. Beautiful. And again, like I said, I mentioned this and I've asked this question to many people all around Asia. And here are some of the answers that it's given me, right? I want to be able to speak up without fear. I want to be succinct in what I'm saying. I want to be more productive. I want to be able to conduct conversations such that it doesn't relegate, to silence or quarrels. I want to have less aimless meetings. I want to be able to ask better questions. I want to get clearer, better, and quicker, right? Everything that we do, everything that we experience in our lives here, if you think about it and pause to just reflect on that, is really about all the conversations that we have or we do not have. I like to say that everything is conversation, right? Leadership is conversation, relationship is conversation, influence is conversation, culture is conversation. Leadership is conversation. Think about the times, that you enjoy working with particular leaders here. It is very likely that those leaders that you respect, those leaders that you look up to, those leaders that you work well with, you have great conversations with these guys here, right? Why is that? Because somehow you feel that they are paying attention to what you're saying. You are being heard, you are being engaged in that interaction. Relationship is conversation. Think about those relationships that are not so great in your life. How were those conversations like? It is very likely that either there are no conversations or it's just very transactional. Influence is conversations. Think about the people that you influence over and how were your conversations with them like? Culture is conversations. When people ask me, what is the culture of a school like, or what is the culture, of an organization like? A simple answer to that question would be, how are people talking to one another? Are they able to engage each other in rich and difficult conversations? Do they have psychological safety in talking to one another? Or are they just avoiding each other, or are they just being transactional in the way they talk with one another? Everything is conversation. Now, what do you think happens, when people that you lead, are curious, they are inclusive, and they dare to ask questions, without fear and consequences. They're able to debate vigorously, and they're able to commit to continuous learning. Well, the answer is a really simple one, right? Amazing things happen between people when the quality of our conversations is good. It is not about what we are talking about, but it's about the quality of the conversations. Amazing things happen between people when the quality of the conversation is good. Listen to what your former president said, right? Abraham Lincoln. He says this: "I don't like that man. I just I must get to know him better." The first time when I saw this really what do you call it? The first time when I saw this quote from Abraham Lincoln, I told myself, I'm not as magnanimous as Abraham Lincoln, right? If I don't like somebody, I'm likely to run away from the guy. I'm likely to talk less with the guy. But here is a guy, the man that says, I don't like that man. I must get to know him better. Conversation, great conversation, is not about agreeing more or disagreeing less with one another. It is about learning how to agree or disagree more productively together. When we have the openness, when we have the willingness to learn how to see the views of other people, to agree or disagree with other people productively, openly, and embracingly, well, this is where the great leaders with authority have real influence, right, in their leadership here. Now, if I were to say it slightly differently, this is where great leaders, right, are able to influence without authority and are able to have authority with respect from people around them. So for you, ladies and gentlemen, as leaders, right, in the schools, at the workplace, or wherever you may be, do you know how you talk? This is a really powerful question, which I first came across it maybe about 3 years ago. Somebody asked me, Kim Pong, do you know how you talk? And my response to the person was, yeah, I think I talk deliberately, I talk carefully. I talk when I'm listening to people before I speak, right? But yet it doesn't really quite answer, the question, do you know how you talk? Shelley Gable, a professor at the University of Santa Barbara, came up with this very interesting positive communication model. And in it, she kind of featured 4 distinct ways in which, we talk to people, in the way we respond to one another. And, so we can either be active, destructive in our conversation, we can be passive, destructive in our conversation, or we can be passive, constructive in our conversation, or we can be engaging each other in our conversations. Now, to make this really simple, it simply means this: in your conversations with people, are you intentionally or are you unintentionally destroying, ignoring, patronizing, or engaging people in your conversations? So let me just help everybody understand what does destroy, ignore, patronize, and engage means, right? Now, to destroy a conversation simply means this. Somebody comes up to me, say Summer, right? Summer comes up to me and say, hey, Kim Pong, the best pizza are found at Mario's, right? And immediately I go like, my gosh, Summer, why would you ever go to Mario's? That is the worst place to go, right? The best place for the pizza is to go to Luigi's here, right? What did I just do? I just destroyed Summer's conversation and I inserted my own opinions here. That's destroying the conversation. What about ignoring a conversation? Same thing. Summer comes to me and says, hey, Kim Pong, I just had the most amazing pizza at Mario's. And I turned to her and said, hey, Summer, did you look at the registration for the summit yesterday? Is it all okay, right? And what did I do? I ignored Summer's situation and inserted my own opinion onto that. The third one is to patronize the conversation. Same thing, right? Maybe this time, right? Amelia comes to me and says, hey, Kim Pong, just had the most amazing pizza at Mario's, right? And I turned to Amelia and said, oh my gosh, that good, huh? By the way, Amelia, have you finished the registration for the summit yet? Right? So what did I do? I gave her passing mention, and then I inserted my own opinion here. Now think about it: destroying, ignoring, patronizing. How often have people done that to you and I? Or how often have we done it to people, unknowingly here? And last one is to engage the conversation, is to show interest, is to have a conversation with the people, with authenticity and with genuinity, right? So same thing, right? Dina comes to me and says, hey, Kim Pong, I just had the most amazing pizza, right? And the way I can engage the conversation could be, gosh, I've never been to Mario's before, right? Tell me more about it. Who did you go with? Why do you think that is so good, right? We are beginning to engage in those conversations. So to destroy, to ignore, to patronize, to engage. Now, let me just say this, right? I think there are times when we do intentionally want to destroy. There are times we do intentionally want to ignore, patronize, conversations here. But the trouble happens is when we unintentionally destroy, ignore, or patronize. So my question to all of you here is this, right? What do you think in your conversations are like with the people in your life here? Now, I'd like to share a very quick example, right? Now, this happens, at work and at home for me. Now, I'm married for, more than 30 years here, and I love my wife dearly, very, very much. Yeah. And in all my conversations with her, my mind is always, engaging my dear wife. A couple of years ago, I sat her down and said, "Hey, hon, there are 4 ways in which people, respond to each other in conversation. They destroy, ignore, patronize, or engage here. I'm really keen to find out from you, right? How have I been responding to all our conversations, right? How have I been responding to you?" And my wife thought for a little moment, and she said, "Pong, I love you very much, but I need to tell you this. Very often, you unconsciously or subconsciously would destroy my conversation or ignore my conversation." When I first heard that from her, my gosh, I was devastated, because in my mind, I was engaging her all the time. And I said, "Gosh, when did I last ignore you? When did I last destroy the conversation?" And she said, "Pong, very often when I'm sharing with you different things, you're not listening to me, but instead you're sharing with me all your solutions, all your advice, all your ways of doing things. I just felt that I am not present in those conversations." And this was probably one of the biggest discovery of my life here, that while I think I'm engaging people in my conversation, while I'm engaging my wife in the conversation, her experience is very different from mine. Talk is the most present and the most repeated behavior, right? And the biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. I thought we are clear in what we are saying, but yet we are not that clear. And yet again, talk, like I mentioned, is the most present and the most repeated behavior in all of us here. And we don't think about it very often, because very often we think that we are good in how we talk. We don't lack that ability in talking, right? And that is true. But what we really do lack, right, is the awareness in how we are actually talking. We are habitual and we are unaware in the way we talk. If we want to be leaders of influence, if we want to be leaders of impact, we got to change this equation here, right? Because every time when we are habitual, every time when we are unaware in our talk, the outcomes of our conversation, the impact and the influence that we desire, they become unpredictable. Our intentions may be good, but how we talk may not convey those intentions. It is no longer, just talk, but it's how we talk that truly matters, between us here. It is about owning our conversations so that we can understand and be understood, so that we can see and be seen, so that we can know and be known, so that we can influence and be influenced. Now, so how do we become more aware of how we talk? How can we become more conscious, in the way we talk and the impact that we share with people? I'd like to share with everybody 2 simple ideas here, right? The first idea, is to be aware, of the power and the risk of our voices, right? The power and the risk in the way we talk. And one very simple way of doing this is to do a very simple assessment called sound wave, right? I've done this very, very often for myself and for my clients. And this is something that I just want to recommend to everybody. Check it out. Do you know your sound wave? And in sound wave, essentially, right, they figure out, it's a tiny little company in the UK that figure out that the way we talk, we talk in 3 big categories, right? The way we ask, the way we suggest, and the way we tell. Now, think about the people that you've grown up with in your life, right? Think about your parents, think about, friends of yours, right? Do they ask more? Do they suggest more? Or do they tell more? And very often, the way the people that we know in our lives talk, they hardly change. If someone is a big asker, these guys are asking through their whole life, right? If somebody is a big teller, they're telling all their lives. Ask, suggest, and tell. And what Soundwave figured out was this, right? There are actually 9 different ways in which we ask, suggest, and tell. To ask is that how do we probe? How do we inquire? How do we diagnose? To suggest is how do we articulate? How do we advocate? And how do we advise? And to tell is how do we critique? How do we challenge? And how do we correct? Now, if you get on to Soundwave and do this simple assessment, and it takes about 36 questions, right? It gives you data points as to what are your top 3 voices, what are your habitual voices, what are your preferred way of conversations with people. So if you do the assessment, it could come up to be, inquire, diagnose, or challenge, or a combination of, what's the next slide here? Of probe. So sorry, my slide just killed again. I apologize. I've been having some problems with my slides for some strange reason that it is just not being very stable. So let me just get it back up here again very quickly. Where are we right now? So I'm just going to do it like that, right? So the top 3 voices could be inquire, diagnose, or challenge, or it could be, probe, critique, or advocate, or it could be, critique, challenge, or correct. Every one of us can have different combinations of all these top 3 voices. And once you understand these top 3 preferred voices, you'll begin to understand, right? What are the power and the risk, associated with your habitual voices here. So let me just give you some examples here, right? If you happen to have the voice of challenge, for example, the power of challenge is positive change. The power of the challenging voice is to help people see perspective from totally different areas and to have the confidence and the courage to make decisions that they may never dare think about or make in the first place. But the trouble, of challenge, if you're overusing it and if you're unintentionally using it all the time, instead of challenging people for positive change, people may see you as attacking their opinions here. Same thing, the voice of inquire. If you have the inquire voice, the power is about engaging and exploring. But the trouble associated with inquire in an overused, unintentional usage of it, you come across as an interrogator, right? For critique, the power of critique is to make great decisions together. But the trouble associated with the critic voice is to criticize. You're focusing on all the negatives here. And let me give you one last one. To correct is to correct for improvement, to correct for growth here. But the unintended use of the voice or the overuse of the correct voice is the voice of punish. So what does this mean? When we understand, our voices, and we are very clear on those data points of what our top 3 voices are, it gives us that ability to be able to use our voices as intended to target our conversations so that we are able to shift the dialogue when we want to change the conversations when we have to, in order to shape the culture the way we require it to be. And the second example that I'd like to share with everybody, oops, so sorry, my screen died again. And the second example that I'd like to share with everybody here, essentially is, so if you don't like to do the sound wave, that's perfectly okay. Here are 3 simple steps I'd like to recommend to you in owning your conversation. The first step is to be aware. The second step is to be curious. And the third step is to be courageous. Be aware, be curious, and be courageous of your voices. Let me talk about the first one, to be aware. To be aware is, is to be aware that, number one, we are habitual in the way we talk. Now, before today, we probably are not very conscious or aware of how we talk, but hopefully after today's conversation and presentation to you, you become more cognizant of how you talk, right? So when you're talking with people nowadays, I'd like you to come to be more observant of how you talk, why you're talking. Now, a great acronym that can really help you is the acronym WAIT, WAIT, right? And it stands for why am I talking, right? As you're talking to people, ask yourself, why am I saying the things the way I'm saying it? Why am I talking so much? Should I be listening more? Now, begin to observe, begin to take note, begin to make observations of how you talk, because you begin to see a pattern in the way you talk to people all the time. The second thing that you want to do is to be curious, right? To be curious in your conversation. Well, to be curious simply means this, right? You don't have all the answers. We don't have all the answers. Now, I started off by saying, the way we talk is habitual and we are unaware in the way we talk, right? We talk by habits. And if our talk is habitual, so would our responses be. Our responses will be habitual, and the consequences of that is predictable habitually. So what does this mean? What if we replace habits with curiosity? Because where there's curiosity, you're more open, you're more embracing, you're more willing, you're more inclusive. The curiosity will dictate a response that is curious here. Habits cancels curiosity. But when we are curious, curiosity does not destroy conversation. Curiosity never ever ignore conversation. Curiosity does not patronize. Curiosity, instead, it engages in the conversation. When we are curious, it changes the way you and I talk, all right? And the last one here is to be courageous, to dare to talk differently, because there's definitely a better way to talk. Be courageous to challenge for change. Be courageous to critique for decisions. Be courageous, to probe for insights when you're not sure and when you're not clear. Be courageous to diagnose for solutions. Be courageous to ask questions. Be courageous to stop telling people what to do, but to be curious and engage people. Be courageous to empower others, for them to take action through the way you talk. At the end of the day, you and I, we have the power to change how we talk, because our talk is not fixed. Our talk is extremely fluid. Do not think that, we are fixated in how we talk, but believe that, you have the power and ability to change your talk so that you can shift the dialogue, change the conversation, and shape the culture that you want. Let me just, finally just close to this conversation, with, two quotes here. The first quote is by Margaret Atwood, who wrote The Handmaid's Tale. And I really love the quote that she said here. And she said this: war happens where language fails, isn't it? War happens when language fails. When we are stuck in the way we talk, and that's the only way we know how to talk, and we cannot switch out the conversation, bad things happen. Once again, our talk is not fixed. The way we talk can be extremely fluid. And finally, I want to quote, good old Abe again. And it is this, right? I don't like that man. I must get to know him better. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, for the opportunity to share this with you. I'm not sure if there are any questions, in the chat box here. If there are, let me just go through it. Help me understand that. Then I'll kind of respond back to you. If not, in the meantime, I'm going to hand it back to Summer. Over to you, Summer. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation this morning. Thank you to everyone who joined as participants. We do have a few minutes for questions. I'll try to monitor the chat, but I do want to remind you that you will receive an email with a link to a survey, and your feedback is very valuable to us. So please take just a few minutes to fill that out when you get it. And when you're ready, if you don't have any questions, there are some questions in the chat. I'm actually going to read those out before we transition to our next. The first one is, what is the link to the sound wave you mentioned? If we're able to pop that resource into the chat.
Yeah, so if if my colleague Malika, if you could just put onto the chat box on the link to Soundwave so that people can gain access. By the way, I'm going to show everybody, this is the guy that's been giving me all the distraction here. That's Momo. That's him. That's her. Go away. Shish. Oh my gosh, this guy's.
There's another.
Yeah, so sorry, go for it, Summer.
I was just saying, there's another question in the chat. Do you have advice for communication across cultures?
I think the only advice that I can give that has been time tested is curiosity, right? When you don't understand something, I think it's always to be, well, let me put it two things: be curious and be humble, right? Be curious that you don't know everything, and be humble to dare to ask questions on things that you do not know. I find that often it's very helpful when I say, hey, help me understand why you do that. Help me understand how you guys would do certain things in certain ways in your culture. And don't assume, right? Be curious, be open, and engage the conversations here. I hope that is helpful.
Another question that's popped up: what if we're under a time crunch and cannot engage a conversation every time, or it falls low on our priority list at that hour?
Yeah, well, I think this is where the power of articulation, happens. To be able to articulate is to be able to say something factually, without much emotion. So sometimes it's a matter of just saying, I don't think I have time to talk to you about this. Can we reschedule this, for a different time here? Or sometimes it could be, as simple as, this is something that is, not something that I can talk, right now. Can we do this some other time? Or, I don't think I want to talk about this. I think it's perfectly okay to state your opinion. But the question is, are you intentionally wanting to say that? So it's okay to reject people, provided this is what you want. But I think there's a way to do it intentionally, and politely and courteously here, right?
Thank you. And I encourage everyone to take a look. There are some great links coming into the chat for resource sharing. And I do know our next session starts in about 9 minutes. We want to give you time to transition, do what you need to do virtually. But thank you again so much for the wonderful presentation, Kim Pong.
Thank you.
If you want to provide any contact information, if anyone wants to exchange that in the chat, I will keep it open for about 2 more minutes as we begin to transition.
Wonderful. So for those of our friends out there, if you're interested in finding out a little bit more about what I do, you can go to my company's website here. So if I can ask Malika to help me just put it into the into the chat box here, that would be great. You can reach us at the website. So we'll be more than happy to be in contact with you. If you want to find out a little bit more about sound wave and all that and how we can be of help to you, please contact us. We'll be more than happy to share information.